There are moments in life that shatter everything you thought you knew, moments when the very people who were supposed to protect you become the source of your deepest pain. For me, that moment came with the chilling sound of a cast iron pan hitting a kitchen floor, and the gut-wrenching realization that my own daughter was living out my childhood nightmare, all while my family stood by and watched. My name is Naomi Bennett. I'm 36 years old, a financial planner living in Charleston, South Carolina. That Wednesday afternoon, the sky was gray and drizzling, and I decided to end work earlier than usual to pick up my daughter, Clara. She's just 6, and for a while, her grandparents had been watching her 2 afternoons a week while I handled my major clients. I'd hesitated for so long before accepting my parents' offer, you know? Our relationship had always been complicated. But with childcare prices through the roof and wanting Clara to spend time with her grandparents, I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. My car had just pulled up in front of the 2-story brick house where my parents had lived for over 25 years. I spotted my sister Nicole's silver minivan parked at an angle beside the white fence. Great, I thought, she must have stopped by too. I didn't want to interrupt anyone, just quietly grab Clara and head home for dinner. But as I opened the front door and stepped into the hallway, a voice froze the blood in my veins. Scrub it clean, you useless girl. Is there anything you can do right? It was my father's familiar growl. Thomas. A retired military drill instructor, and his voice boomed through the kitchen like a punch made of sound. I moved quickly, silently, through the kitchen doorway. The scene that unfolded nearly took the air from my lungs. Clara stood on a short plastic stool in front of the sink. Her light brown curls were clumped together from splashes of water. Her white t-shirt with a kitten print was soaked and covered in soap. Her tiny hands, red from hot water, were trying to scrub a heavy cast iron skillet, a pan I myself found hard to lift. Thomas stood close behind her, pointing at the sink, his face flushed, barking each word like he was scolding a new recruit. Nicole's kids could wash dishes when they were 5. You need to be taught everything over and over. My mother, Judith, sat at the dining table, flipping through a magazine, not even looking up. My sister, Nicole, lounged on the living room sofa a few feet away, eyes glued to her phone. Her daughters, Ashley, 10, and Mia, 8, were sprawled on the rug, playing on an iPad, giggling nonstop. She's so dumb, Ashley laughed loudly. Her dad left 'cause no one taught her anything, Mia added casually, eyes still on the screen. Clara flinched and dropped the pan. Water splashed everywhere. She hurried to pick it up, hands trembling. I saw her shoulder shake slightly, and a single tear slid silently down her cheek. I'm sorry. This is too heavy, Clara whispered, as if afraid of being punished again. Tough as life, Thomas snapped. If you're as weak as your mother, you won't amount to anything. A sharp snap went off in my head. It wasn't the sound of the pan. It was the sound of my breaking point. I shoved the door open and stepped into the room, my voice cold and sharp. Take your hands off that pan, Clara. Right now. Every head in the room turned toward me. The shock hit like a wave of silence. Clara looked back, eyes wide, then ran into my arms. Mom, she cried, her hands still wet, clinging to me like a lifeline. I crouched to hold her, her little body cold and damp, my heart shattered into pieces. What the hell is going on in here? I asked, my voice dangerously even, just below a scream. My father straightened up, face burning. I'm teaching her responsibility. Clearly something you failed to do. I didn't look away, one arm around Clara, the other resting gently on her head like a shield. By calling her useless while letting the other girls lie around on an iPad? That's your definition of responsibility? No one answered. But Clara's eyes, filled with fear, hope, and relief, will never leave my memory. I took Clara out of that kitchen in silence. Each step felt like I was walking over my own past, each one sinking me deeper into memories I'd spent over 30 years trying to bury. You see, I used to be Clara. The child standing in that very house, always feeling like the extra, the shadow behind my sister, Nicole, the pride of the family. I remember my 10th birthday vividly. I'd looked forward to it all week, even handmade invitation cards for my classmates. But on that day, my mother casually said, Nicole has a ballet recital at the City Theater. We're all going to watch. We'll celebrate your birthday another time. That another time never came. Nicole, meanwhile, just had to sneeze and a private doctor would be summoned to the house. She took piano lessons with an in-home tutor 3 times a week. I loved painting, but the only brush I ever got was a frayed one from Nicole's old art set with a warning, use this for now. Don't ask for too much. Every report card I brought home, full of A's and praise from teachers, earned me only a bored nod from my father. Nicole got those grades, too. Meanwhile, Nicole's report cards with C's and D's were proudly displayed on the fridge like trophies. When we both applied to college, Nicole didn't make it into any private schools and had to attend the local community college. I earned a full scholarship to Georgetown University. All my mother said was, "That's far. Don't expect anyone to visit." During 4 years of college, my parents never came to my graduation, never called to check in. Meanwhile, they sent Nicole money regularly so she could rent an apartment close to home so she wouldn't have to struggle with part-time jobs. The most painful moment might have been when I introduced my boyfriend, Mark, to them. We met in school. He was a resident at a public hospital. At our first dinner, my father bluntly asked, "Can you buy a house within 3 years? Naomi won't stay in a rental for long." I wanted to sink into the floor, not because of his rudeness, but because of Nicole's expression, amused, like she was watching a slow-motion car crash. When Mark and I eventually broke up under the strain of work and distance, my mother's only comment was, "Well, no surprise with the way you try to control everything. Who would stick around?" I used to think that when I had a child, things would change. That my parents would look at Clara and finally see the love I'd never stopped giving. I naively believed that by paying their monthly mortgage, I could buy a little fairness for my daughter. But no. That image of Clara standing hunched at the sink, hands trembling from hot water and fear, that was me all over again, just smaller. The only difference was no one ever walked in back then and said enough. And maybe that's why I felt a rage so cold it burned. Not just because Clara had been humiliated, but because I had allowed history to repeat itself. I glanced into the rearview mirror. Clara sat in the back seat, staring blankly out the window, lips pressed tight. She wasn't crying, but that silence terrified me. "Clara," I called gently. "It's Mommy. I'm sorry." "I broke the pan," she whispered, as if her very existence needed permission. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. That pan, that damned pan, heavier than my childhood, and I had let it crush Clara without even noticing. "Clara, do you know why I'm upset?" I asked, trying to soften my voice even though my throat was burning. "Because I broke something," she murmured. I turned fully to face her. "No, Clara. I'm upset because I didn't protect you sooner." She didn't say anything, but her eyes shimmered. We drove home in silence. Each street in Charleston slipped past the window like slices of time, carrying me through forgotten memories. I was no longer that 10-year-old girl left behind backstage. I was a mother now, and I would never leave my daughter behind again. That night, after bathing Clara and tucking her into bed, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at a cup of cold tea. My laptop was open, its screen glowing with my bank account statement. The line was clear, recurring transfer, $2,150 per month, starting October 2019. Beneficiaries, Thomas and Judith Bennett. I had forgotten the exact number. Every month, the money was withdrawn automatically, like a reflex. Nearly 4 years. Nearly $100,000 poured into that house. The house where my daughter was just humiliated in front of the very people I was still trying to please. I remembered exactly how it started. September 2019, my parents suddenly called a family meeting about a financial emergency. My father, with a completely shameless expression, handed me a bank statement, 3 months of unpaid mortgage. My mother sat beside him, eyes watery. "If the bank forecloses, I don't know where we'll go." At the time, I had just switched to a new firm. My salary had increased significantly, and Clara had just started kindergarten. I thought, I can help for a while. Once things stabilize, they'll pay me back. Or at the very least, be grateful. They said they'd repay me gradually once my dad's retirement checks kicked in, but that money never showed up. And words of thanks were even rarer. I remembered one Thanksgiving when Nicole sniped, "Naomi, you're always so dramatic, helping mom and dad with a little money like you're carrying the whole world." My mother smirked. My dad reminded me that family always comes first. I said nothing. I never told Nicole I was the only one paying our parents' mortgage. Maybe out of pride. Maybe out of fear she'd start asking me for money, too. Nicole had a husband, Craig, a sales manager at a local car dealership, and 2 daughters, but not once had they contributed financially. In fact, I overheard my mother once telling a friend, "Nicole's busy raising 2 little girls. She can't handle the financial stuff. Naomi is independent, makes good money, she can afford to help. A good income doesn't mean you're not exhausted." I often worked until 8 at night, commuting between Charleston and Columbia, sacrificing evenings with Clara just to make sure my parents didn't lose their home. And in return, my daughter was forced to wash dishes and called useless. I couldn't stop wondering if I hadn't arrived early that day, how much worse would it have gotten? I opened an old Excel file, my long-term financial plan now layered with digital dust. One line read, "Support for parents, $2,150 per month indefinite." Next to it was a goal I never even started, college fund for Clara, not yet initiated. I didn't recognize the person I had become. I was supporting 2 generations, a child who needed love and 2 adults who refused to grow up. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. I let it ring until it stopped. A few seconds later, a message came through, "Can you buy another big water jug for the house? The dispenser started leaking the other day." No check-in, no apology for what Clara had endured. Just another request. I typed, "Mom, from now on, I won't be covering any household expenses. You and Dad need to reevaluate your finances." I didn't send it. I deleted it, then typed again, "Mom, what happened today crossed my line. I need some space. Please don't contact me until I reach out." I hit send. For the first time in years, I dared to say no. And instead of guilt, I felt relief. I shut the laptop, walked quietly to Clara's room. She was fast asleep, clutching her old teddy bear. I gently brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, and I whispered, "I'm sorry for letting you carry burdens that were never yours. From now on, things will change." The next morning, I took Clara to school earlier than usual. She was still quiet, but there was a shift in her eyes. No longer as lost as the night before, but still hesitant every time I looked away. After kissing her goodbye and reminding her teacher to call me if anything unusual happened, I walked back to my car, opened my phone, and began clearing my voicemail. 6 missed calls from my mother, 2 texts from my father, and 1 call from Nicole. I opened the first message from Mom, "Naomi, you overreacted yesterday. Your father was just teaching Clara discipline. She needs to learn not to be spoiled." I didn't respond. I knew all too well that discipline in our family was the perfect disguise for emotional outbursts and the need to control. At 10 a.m., I chose to call Nicole back. She picked up almost immediately. No greeting. Voice dripping with accusation. "Are you serious, Naomi? You're kicking Mom and the girls out over something small. That's Mom and Dad's house, right? And I'm the one who's been paying to keep the bank from taking it for the last 4 years, I replied, calm, but firm. Nicole paused, then scoffed. "So, what? You want credit now? Mom says you're using money to force the whole family to listen to you." "I'm not forcing anyone, but from now on, if someone wants to be around my daughter, they need to show basic respect. Ashley and Mia were just joking. Clara needs to toughen up. You're making a big deal out of nothing." I took a deep breath. "Nicole, kids don't joke about Clara's dad leaving her because he didn't love her. And your mom stood by and said nothing. Do you really think that's nothing?" This time Nicole didn't reply immediately. When she finally did, her voice lost its smug edge, now hesitant. "So, what are you planning to do?" "For now," I said, steadying my voice, "Clara won't be going to Mom and Dad's, and I'm no longer covering any costs for that house. I need to protect my daughter, even if that makes everyone else uncomfortable." Nicole exhaled like she'd just learned she had to pay her own electric bill. But she didn't argue further. That afternoon, while in a meeting at the office, I received a message from my mother, "If you're really cutting the family off over something this small, then I have nothing more to say." No apology, no concern about whether Clara was okay. I didn't reply. Instead, I called my attorney, Jackie, the one who helped me draft my will after the divorce from Mark. "Naomi, is everything all right?" Jackie asked, concerned. "I want to make a few updates to Clara's trust and temporary guardianship documents," I said. "I want to make sure that under no circumstances do my parents have access to Clara without my written permission." Jackie didn't ask why. She paused, then replied, "Understood." Send me a schedule. I'll prepare the necessary clauses. That evening, I called Clara's child psychologist, Dr. Pearl, who we had been seeing for routine check-ins. Have you noticed anything unusual with Clara lately? I asked after summarizing everything. Recently, she's shown signs of mild stress. Some loss of appetite, occasional trouble sleeping, slight avoidance of group activities. I initially thought it was due to adjusting to a new environment, she said. But hearing all this, the root might be deeper. Please let me know if she needs additional therapy, I whispered. I refused to let her grow up feeling like she's never enough. Not even one more day. She agreed to schedule a new session next week. I hung up and walked toward Clara's bedroom. She was already asleep, arms wrapped around her teddy bear, mumbling softly in her dreams. I sat beside her, whispered, "From now on, I'm your boundary. I'm the one who decides who gets to stay in your life." For the first time, I felt no need to be the good daughter anymore. I just needed to be a good enough mother for Clara. And if anyone thought protecting my child made me extreme, I'd wear that label proudly for the rest of my life. Because nothing is more precious than the peace in my daughter's eyes. That Monday morning is still vivid in my mind. A regular day at the office until the desk phone rang. "Naomi, there's an older woman on the line who says she's your mother," my assistant whispered. "She says it's a family emergency. Should I transfer the call?" I closed my eyes for a beat, inhaled deeply, then nodded. "Put it on speaker. No need for privacy. Let everyone hear if they want to." "Naomi, it's Mom." Judith's voice came sharp and cold. "You think I wouldn't find out what you did with the bank?" I leaned back in my chair, steady. "You mean the part where you no longer get your mortgage payment?" "Don't be coy." "The automatic transfer bounced and the bank called me this morning." "You're going to put us out on the street?" I let out a dry laugh. "You're calling my office to interrupt my workday just to ask why I'm no longer paying your debts." She went quiet for a moment, then burst out. "It's your obligation. We raised you for 20 years, and now you're running from responsibility?" My fingers tapped lightly on the wooden desk, each beat like counting past wounds. "I never signed a financial contract with you. You and Dad stopped being parents the day you let a 6-year-old scrub cast iron pans and get called stupid in your kitchen." She started breathing heavily, as if on the verge of tears. "You'll regret this, Naomi." I didn't respond. I just hung up. I didn't cry. I told myself I should be proud of that. But by lunchtime, I received an email from my bank. "Unauthorized access attempt detected on your personal account at 9:16 a.m. from an unrecognized device. Access denied." I stared at the notification, heart pounding. I had never shared login credentials except once 3 years ago when my father asked to borrow them temporarily to apply for a refinancing. I let him log in on my computer. I thought, he's my dad. What could go wrong? I called the bank to confirm. The login attempt came from a tablet using an IP address linked to Thomas Bennett's residence. The representative said, "We've locked down your accounts and recommend immediate password changes." I wasn't sure whether I felt angrier or sadder. Everything inside me hardened like a stone pressing into my chest. That night, after Clara fell asleep, I opened my laptop. But this time, I didn't check finances. I typed, "Therapists for adult survivors of emotional family abuse." I found the name Dr. Erica Palmer, a trauma counselor specializing in intergenerational family systems. I booked a session for later that week. The first appointment took place in a small, softly lit room, lightly scented with peppermint oil. Dr. Palmer didn't pry, she simply listened. As I detailed everything from my childhood to how Clara was humiliated, she nodded slowly. "Naomi," she said. "What you're doing is right, but painful." I gave a hollow laugh. I don't know what's worse, cutting off financial support or realizing they tried to hack my account like I'm some kind of ATM. "Because you still expect them to act like parents," she said gently. "But they're not. They grew up believing children exist to serve, not to be loved unconditionally." I froze. That sentence hit a truth I had never dared to say out loud. She continued, "What you're breaking is a cycle that's lasted for generations, and Naomi, that takes extraordinary strength." I left that day with a note she handed me, a personal affirmation. At the top it read, "I owe no one my silence at the cost of my child's safety." That evening, my father left a handwritten note on my doorstep. It wasn't an apology, not a truce, just one line: if you don't resume the financial support, your mother might lose the house. We won't be responsible if your daughter has to watch her grandparents become homeless. That was the moment I realized they hadn't changed. They'd only changed tactics. This time, instead of attacking me, they were using Clara as leverage. And that made me ready to do something I'd never considered before: protect my child at any cost. That morning, I received an unexpected message from my mother: if you truly want to handle this like an adult, your father and I will come to the therapy session, but just once. I didn't know what made them agree: pressure from the bank, my emotional distance, or simply fear of what the neighbors might think. But I didn't care. As long as they were willing to sit down and listen, that was enough to begin. I scheduled the meeting at Dr. Erica Palmer's office, the therapist who had guided me through my emotional shifts over the past month. She understood me. More importantly, she wasn't easily swayed by the emotional theatrics of aging parents. The therapy room was bright and quiet, without the musty old wood smell or velvet armchairs of my parents' house. Just soft lighting, a pot of chamomile tea, and 4 dark leather chairs arranged in a semicircle. I arrived early. Dr. Palmer sat across from me and gently asked, "Naomi, what do you want to achieve from today's session?" I want them to understand that I'm no longer the child they can control with guilt or obligation. And more importantly, I want them to know that if they don't change, they will no longer be Clara's grandparents. At exactly 10 a.m., my parents walked in. My father, Thomas, wore a crisp white shirt, dark tie, and polished shoes. He entered like he was attending a courtroom hearing, eyes scanning every item in the room. My mother, Judith, wore a pale pink knit dress, clutching her purse tightly, lips pressed together as if holding back emotion. After brief introductions, Dr. Palmer began. The goal of this session is to allow everyone to speak in a safe and honest way. No interruptions, no judgment. She turned to me. "Naomi, if you're ready, please begin." I looked directly at my parents. "I'm not here to argue. I'm here to set boundaries. Clara won't return to your home unless you acknowledge that what happened was wrong and agree to change." My father scoffed. A dry, grating laugh. "Admit we were wrong for making her wash a few dishes? That's called discipline, Naomi. You're acting like we tortured the child." I tilted my head slightly. Discipline doesn't include calling a 6-year-old stupid or comparing her to other kids and letting her be ridiculed. Dr. Palmer raised her hand, her voice calm, but firm. "Thomas, it's valid for Naomi to feel that those actions crossed a line. This is a space for listening, not justification." My father leaned back, arms crossed. He said nothing more, but his tension was obvious. I turned to my mother. "You heard what they said to Clara. You were right there. You said nothing." She took a deep breath, lips trembling. "I thought it was just childish teasing. I didn't realize it affected Clara that much." "And you didn't know she cried every night after coming home from your house?" I said softly. "I used to do the same. But no one ever asked how I felt either." The air in the room grew heavy. My mother turned away, dabbing a tear from her cheek. "So, what do you want?" my father asked, his voice no longer as firm. I raised my head. "I want both of you to commit to at least 3 therapy sessions. I want Clara to see you only under supervision. And if there's any sign of favoritism, criticism, or comparison, this relationship ends permanently." "Permanently?" my mother echoed in disbelief. "Yes," I answered firmly. "Because real love doesn't come with conditions like, as long as she behaves, or as long as she doesn't inconvenience us." Dr. Palmer nodded. "The boundaries Naomi is setting are healthy and developmentally appropriate. I'm willing to help the whole family if everyone agrees to participate." Silence settled over the room. My mother was the first to speak. "All right, I'll go to therapy." My father glanced at her. "Judith." "No, Thomas," she interrupted for the first time. "We need to fix this before we lose anything else." My father clenched his jaw, then finally gave a small nod. 3 sessions, just 3. I didn't say another word. I just nodded gently. About 2 months after our first therapy session, I got a call from my mom while I was prepping dinner for Clara. "Naomi, your dad and I made a decision. We're selling the house." I froze, knife paused mid-chop. A dozen questions ran through my head, but I simply replied, "Really?" Yes, I called a realtor this morning. We found a 2-bedroom apartment near the bus line. It's affordable and not far from your place. It wasn't the guilt-laced tone I was used to. It was unexpectedly calm. I didn't know if I should feel relieved, surprised, or weary. But I knew one thing: for the first time, my parents were doing something for themselves without relying on me. A week later, I helped them pack. The old 2-story house I once called home was now dusty, silent, and filled with cardboard boxes. On the mantel sat a photo frame of Nicole hugging her 2 kids, with me in the back, wearing a forced smile. My father, Thomas, didn't say much. He quietly wrapped items in newspaper. My mom occasionally glanced at me, then looked away, as if searching for words she didn't know how to say. I didn't need apologies anymore, at least not verbal ones. 3 weeks later, they moved into their new apartment, a quiet 3-story building with no big backyard or white picket fence, but cozy enough. They handled the deposit, maintenance fees, and utilities themselves. And for the first time in years, not a single dollar left my bank account. As for Clara, after 4 sessions with Dr. Pearl, she started laughing more. She no longer flinched at raised voices. She stopped asking if she'd done something wrong every time she dropped something. One evening, as I was working at my laptop, Clara peeked out from her room holding a crayon drawing. "Mom, I made this for Dr. Pearl." I turned around. In the drawing was a little girl between 2 smiling adults with a beaming sun above. I told her my head feels like it can breathe better now. I couldn't stop the tears, but this time they were grateful ones. We hadn't let Clara visit her grandparents yet, but Dr. Pearl suggested short, supervised meetings. Since my parents completed their therapy commitment, I agreed to a park visit with me close by. That day, Thomas brought a small wooden box with a handcrafted puzzle inside. "I made this in the community center woodworking class," he said, gently pushing the box toward Clara. She looked at me for reassurance. I nodded. Clara opened it, puzzled at first, then smiled. "It turns into a rainbow," she squealed. "That's right," he said, and for the first time, I saw my father kneel to her level. No orders, no judgment. Afterward, my mom pulled me aside while Clara played nearby. "Naomi, thank you for giving us a second chance." I looked at her and didn't see the woman who once made me feel not enough. "This chance is for Clara," I said, "but if you keep trying, I won't stand in your way of being her grandmother." Not long after, something I didn't expect happened. Nicole reached out to meet. We sat at a small cafe near the school. No sunglasses, no kids. She sat across from me in silence for a while before speaking. I've been thinking a lot." I tilted my head, waiting. "Clara told me she gets scared visiting Mom and Dad. She said she saw Clara being yelled at and worried she'd be next if she messed up." Something stirred in me. Part overdue anger, part quiet relief. Someone else had finally seen what I once stood alone trying to prove. Nicole continued. "I think I need to change. Not just how I raise my kids, but how I treat you." I didn't respond right away. The coffee cooled between us. But for the first time, I didn't feel like I was sitting across from an enemy. There were no hugs, no rushed promises. But when I came home that night, Clara ran into my arms and asked, "Mom, is something weird with the sky today? Everyone feels lighter." I hugged her tight and smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes when we finally let go of what hurts, the whole world feels a little lighter, too." Since early spring, we've kept a bi-weekly schedule for Clara to see her grandparents. Always in public places like the city library, the botanical garden, or her favorite bakery with the blue vanilla cupcakes. I was always present, never too far. Not because I didn't trust them, but because I understood that a child who's been hurt needs a stable presence nearby to feel safe. At first, Thomas and Judith were awkward. My dad kept his distance, quietly observing, while my mom tried to make conversation. But after a few visits, I noticed subtle changes. My dad brought a children's book with illustrations and tried reading it to Clara. My mom stopped interrupting Clara's stories and waited until she finished before gently responding. One time, Clara accidentally spilled orange juice on her dress. I braced myself, expecting the usual scolding tone, but instead my mom gently dabbed the stain with a napkin and said, "Are you okay, sweetie? Let's try placing the cup farther next time." I turned away, smiling, not from emotion, but from relief. The boundaries I had put in place were working. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of everything alone. As for Nicole, things between us became easier. She started taking Ashley and Mia to see a family therapist and even asked for tips on building her own financial independence instead of relying on our parents. One Saturday morning, while Clara and Ashley played with toy dishes in the backyard, Nicole walked over with 2 cups of coffee. She sat beside me on the old wooden bench and said without preamble, "I know you felt really alone in this family. I don't want Clara to grow up like we did." I turned to her, her expression was sincere. "Then let's not let history repeat itself," I said. "Start by listening to your kids instead of teaching them to stay quiet." Nicole nodded. We sat in silence for a while longer. There was a quiet kind of understanding between 2 women who had both been hurt but were trying to do better for the next generation. I also began letting go of the constant guilt. In the past, whenever I refused to transfer money to my parents, I'd lie awake wondering if they'd be okay or if they'd label me ungrateful. But now, I realize refusing to financially support them doesn't mean I don't love them. It just means I'm loving my child the right way. One day during our final family therapy session, Dr. Palmer asked me, "Naomi, if today were the last time you ever spoke about all this, what would you want your daughter to remember?" I didn't hesitate. That she's worthy of unconditional love and that if one day she needs to reclaim her own boundaries, even from me, she has every right to do so. It wasn't the answer my parents wanted to hear. But I didn't say it for them. I said it for Clara. And I knew she was listening in her own way. Since then, Thomas hasn't mentioned money again. He even turned down Nicole's offer to help out financially a few times, saying he needed to learn to live within his means. He never said that to me, but his actions spoke clearly enough. My mom started journaling again, a habit she had back when I was in grade school. Once I found her notebook left on the table, its cover printed with faded flowers. I didn't read it, but I knew it held the words she couldn't yet speak. As for Clara, she no longer clings to me during visits. She talks about school, sings songs she's learned, and proudly shows off her drawings like they're badges of honor. And every time her grandparents respond with kindness, I see her smile just a little more confidently. I still keep my monthly solo therapy appointments, not because I'm broken, but because I never want to lose the habit of checking in with myself. Every session feels like dusting off a corner of my heart. So, no one else, especially Clara, has to breathe in something old and heavy. My family may never be perfect, but we're learning how not to hurt each other over the little things. And sometimes that alone is a victory. From childhood wounds to becoming a mother, I've learned that real love doesn't come from blind sacrifice or staying silent. Setting boundaries didn't make me ungrateful. It made me the best protector for my daughter. Clara deserves to grow up in a home built on fairness and respect, something I never had. And in the end, I realized that sometimes the strongest act of love is saying enough. Not to push people away, but to hold on to what matters most.